dedicate to learn a little bit more about how best to support individuals that may not look like you, individuals that you may have in your life that you may love very dearly, people that you may admire, but you're not really all the way there understanding some of the different challenges that they are experiencing. And today, of course, we're speaking about Black women. So like Bethany had said, my name is Chinenye Nkemere. I am trained in political science and race theory from Ohio State. And after that, I went down to Houston, Texas to teach middle school, which is very interesting because now I have come back kind of full circle and I'm back to teaching, which is something that I really enjoy doing. Other than teaching and community engagement, I'm really interested in strategic communications and highly active in Cleveland, pushing and agitating for police reform here in Northeast Ohio. That's how Bethany and I actually met a couple of years ago, doing this work and filling that space. So again, very happy to see you guys all here today. So the first question you really need to ask yourself is, are you an ally to Black women? Now that is a personal question. That's a question that you may have to answer for yourself. Allyship, however, the way that we describe it, necessitates actionable steps behind it. You cannot just call yourself an ally, close your laptop, and literally go on with the rest of your day. Allyship necessitates actionable steps. Black women need allies, accomplices, and advocates to do the work independently from Black women, both privately and publicly within their own networks.
So something that we talked about in our last meeting as well was the difference between allyship and accomplices and advocates. What I really want people to kind of think about is that we play different roles whenever we're uplifting others. We talk about allies, but also thinking about accomplices. When we're talking about or acting as accomplices, we're really thinking about learning. We're thinking about understanding and and looking at your perspective. So an individual from a non-marginalized group who listens to Black women, researches and listens and learns independently and centers the thought leaders and subject matter experts in that group. When you're acting as an advocate, it's a little bit more active, right? So you're building on that foundation of allyship and accomplice framework, and then you're becoming an advocate where you're taking an action, right? You're thinking about your ability to use your privilege, integrating those ideas that you've been learning about and really putting them into practice in the world. An example of this is discussing ideas with your family, but also any of the things we talked about in our last meeting as well. It can be anything from joining a protest to donating to different movements, to immersing yourself in these movements.
So today, we are talking about intersectionality. Now, this word has gained a lot of prominence again as we're moving in this new social movement, specifically because it is a touchstone for a lot of social change. So intersectionality was created, the word was created in 1989 by Northeast Ohio Canton native attorney, Black feminist scholar, Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, this word has, again, was created in 1989, but the thought process, the ideas behind it have been around for quite some time. Crenshaw had explored through her legal career and of course as her actual perspective as a Black woman, has explored the intersections between the law, between race, between gender, and looked at how anti-discrimination laws and really marginalized Black women. So Black women who experience these kinds of layered forms of marginalization were often told to choose which type of oppression they wanted to move forward with. So if you are a Black woman and you're stating at your job you are experiencing not only sex-based harassment, but you're also receiving racialized harassment. At that time, you were not able to advance both cases at the same time. You would have to choose one. And that completely ignores, again, the fullness of that harassment. It completely ignores the fullness of that individual's experience, and oftentimes was leaving Black women without any kind of justice and without any kind of remedy within the court system. So what exactly is intersectionality? For our purposes for this particular presentation, it argues that the experiences of being both a woman and Black cannot be considered separately because they are not experienced or lived separately. So of course, I call myself a woman, I call myself Black, of course, because those are two things that I am. I do not wake up one day and say, today I would like to be a woman and negate my Blackness. Or on the opposite side, I do not say, today I would like to be Black and therefore negate my womanness, my femininity. Intersectionality is the layering of all of those different elements of who we are together that gives us a fullness and a holistic sense of how not only the world sees us, but how we experience the world. So some of the things that we're seeing, of course, on this very basic stick figure is race, education, sexuality, ability, class. And as you know, of course, Bethany and I are both women. We see the world through the lens of being women. We have a lot of commonalities there. But Bethany and I grew up very differently. I grew up very, very suburban here in Northeast Ohio. I grew up upper middle class. I am also an immigrant. My name is foreign. All of these different layers have informed the differences of who I am. And same with Bethany. She grew up in a very rural area in Worcester, Ohio. Did not have a traditional high school experience. She was homeschooled. All of these different elements layer and view us and inform our world differently.
Absolutely. So next slide is going to be a little bit of a video of someone explaining kind of the basics of intersectionality.
In light of the recent protests, I thought I would take a moment to talk about intersectionality. You see how all the things behind me are linked? Intersectionality is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw to address the linkage between all of these things. This is the literal definition of intersectionality. Take a moment to pause and read it if you need it. Basically, intersectionality is acknowledging that some people might be minorities in multiple ways. Like they could be Black and a woman, Black and a trans woman, Black and a queer trans woman, or any other like mixture of any sort of identity. An important part of feminism is acknowledging that people have layered identities, and to be truly an ally, you have to be able to acknowledge and try to support all aspects of that. Kimberly Crenshaw has a TED Talk up on YouTube that explains intersectionality much better than this TikTok will allow me to. Real feminism is intersectional.
So just drilling down on the point a little bit more, there is a very famous quote that states, all of the women are white and all of the Blacks are men, and some of us are brave, meaning Black women. Some of us are both. One of the cases that Kimberly Crenshaw looked at was a 1961 discrimination case. Brought by 5 African-American women who worked at General Motors. Again, they were trying to sue for racial and gender discrimination, but the courts had found that the women were not discriminated against because on the base of gender, because there were secretaries that worked at the company that were women. So therefore that negated their gender-based claim. And then in addition, that there were African-American men that worked on the factory floor, so therefore that disproved their racial discrimination. And if you can see, that intersection between race and gender really had left Black women completely out of that system, completely out without a particular remedy.
There's a couple of things that you should probably know before you get down there. Okay, shoot. Well, you're something called Black, which means that you're susceptible to a bunch of discrimination, and you'll constantly be living in a state of questioning your self-worth and your beauty. But honestly, being Black is a bit dangerous, but it's tons of fun, so don't even worry about it. That was a lot to take in, but you know what? I think I can handle that. So I'm ready to go. Put me down there. One more thing before you go. You're also something called a female, which means that you will constantly live your life being compared to men, and every single thing you do that is successful will also be compared to men. But besides that, it is super fun being a girl, so you'll love it. Don't even worry about it. So being Black and being a woman are both fun, but they also both kind of suck. Okay, cool. Anything else I should know? You know what? I think you're good. You know what? Go have some fun. When were you gonna tell her that she's bisexual? Dude, I don't know how much more she could have handled. I mean, we'll just tell her in like 15 years.
So in the modern world, again, we have the framework for intersectionality, but this concept has existed since the mid 1800s. Sojourner Truth's speech in Akron, Ain't I a Woman, very famous speech, really was one of the first racialized look at femininity from the perspective of a formerly enslaved human being. There were so many different layers at play where she was speaking about the fact that, yes, she is obviously a woman, but she was not being protected in the ways that traditional femininity in America was protecting white women. Similarly, Anna Julia Cooper's essay, The Colored Woman's Office, declared that because of the marginalization of Black women, they were able to be the most important individuals in any kind of social change movement because they're able to freely go between different intersections, speaking the languages of different styles of oppression, while always being authentic and speaking out for themselves. So why exactly is intersectionality important? First things first, it broadened the first wave of feminism, which at its inception, American-based feminism really centered middle-class white women, middle-class white women that were married specifically. And to be able to get a multiplicity of experiences of poor women, of LGBTQ femmes, folks, and women, immigrant, undocumented women, different types of body types. Intersectionality really marries the idea of including these voices because their perspective is necessary and needed. And the most important ways that we know this is that it's applicable in all fields. Black women are represented in all areas of life, whether it is music, the medical professional, the medical field, politics, economics, citizenship, immigration status. And if their voices and if their perspectives are not seen as valid or not put to the forefront, really the voices and the experiences of Black women are the ones being completely lost, while others are getting amplified. So moving on to another term of art is misogynoir. I'm gonna say that one more time. Misogynoir. That's a word you guys should definitely practice. Misogynoir is a term of art. It's a portmanteau of misogyny, which is a systemic disenfranchisement of women in general, and the word noir, meaning Black. Now, this idea, this framework is really born out of critical race theory and really born out of intersectionality. and was created by queer feminist Moya Bailey. Now, she created this term while she was studying the medical textbooks that doctors and other health professionals were using in the early 1900s. And what she noticed from these textbooks were that doctors and health professionals and hospital administrators had a very specific ire for Black women that they treated. Now, it encapsulated all things like Black women did not feel pain. They didn't have nerve endings, all the way to experimenting on Black women. Modern gynecology was born out of the experiment of these doctors utilizing, much without consent many times, of Black women here in the States. And the most apparent versions of misogynoir are things that you can't all the way put a finger on, but you can notice when you see it happen to other people. You can notice this when you see this explain itself in certain elements or in certain media or journalistic spaces. So we have a video right next that will really, really explore the idea and the pattern and the practice of misogynoir.
I have two questions. The first is, you've said repeatedly that you think that some of the equipment that governors are requesting, they don't actually need. You said New York might not need 30,000. You said it on Sean Hannity's Fox News. You said
you know,
that
why
you might.
Why don't you people act? Let me ask you.
You said
why
some
don't
state.
Why don't you act in a little more positive? It's always trying to
My
get
question
you,
to you
get
is,
you, get you. And you know what? That's why nobody trusts the media anymore.
My
That's
question
why
to you is, how is that going to
Excuse me,
impact?
you didn't hear me. That's why you used to work for the Times and now you work for somebody else. Look, let me tell you something. Be nice. Don't
Mr.
be
President, my
threatening.
question
Don't
is,
be threatening. Be nice. Go
my
ahead.
question is, how is that going to impact how you fill these orders for ventilators or for masks? Your
not gonna
views that
impact.
you're not going to, it's not going to
We're
impact you at
producing
all.
tremendous numbers of ventilators. We're doing a great job on it. Mike Pence, our vice president, has headed up the task force, which has been incredible, the job they've done. We have everybody in the White House working on it. We have everybody in the country is working on this in one way or the other. The fact is, we've done a great job of delivering. You've seen the biggest people in the business. I mean, there's nobody even close to this group of people. We had a meeting at 3 o'clock. It lasted for a long time. It was a
So if you could just go back one slide so we can kind of just discuss that.
Process this.
Yeah, just a little bit more. So Bethany, what did you see in that clip?
Well, the two things that stuck out to me were you people and him talking to her about being aggressive. So those are that's very, it's not even very well coded language. It's very on its nose. But then again, I mean, the whole exchange, he's talking over her. He's denying facts. And he does that to media a lot, but I think particularly in this exchange, there's a lot of coded language. There's a particular animus, and it's meant to oppress her voice, but also kind of terrorize her and bully her. Especially
because we see this as a workplace issue. I mean, this journalist, Yamiche El-Sendor, is noted and well respected in the industry. Her voice is one that, at least personally, I seek out because I know that she's going to give, factual, hard-hitting, and well-researched reports about whatever the topic of the day is. And when you think about being at work, because she's technically at work, having the person that you are supposed to be interacting with, not even technically her boss, but an individual that you're supposed to be interacting with, talking over you, which is a coded way of misogyny for women, and then also utilizing coded language like you people, that makes it very difficult to do your job and do your job well when you're not seen as a subject matter expert, or where you're not seen as an individual that is capable of doing their job efficiently and effectively. It's a very specific type of anti-Blackness. It's a very specific type of misogyny, and that Black women experience simultaneously, regardless of industry. So with regards to misogynoir in systems and in public, we see misogynoir in a very specific system in healthcare. And it's so pervasive and so complex of a problem, but it seems as though that the issues are only being felt by Black women. So one issue is Black female and Black maternal health care. Now, Black maternal health and mortality, excuse me, the rate of mortality for Black women who are giving birth is drastically higher. And it is drastically higher even when you are controlling for factors like education or income or any kind of like location of where an individual is living. And we see that Black women note a problem, see a problem, and are able to work outside of traditional systems to address that issue and try to make incremental but marked change within their communities. And none is more visible here in Cleveland than with Christian Farmer, the brilliant Christian Farmer here in Cleveland, Ohio, who had created Birthing Beautiful Communities, which is a doula and holistic health Black maternal health care service that really wraps around the entire birth experience and first year experience of Black women here in Cleveland. Their mission is to achieve equitable birth outcomes for Black women. So specifically targeting Black women, making sure that their infant mortality rates are going down in Cleveland, specifically addressing these systemic and community structures that lead to really poor birth outcomes here in Northeast Ohio. Another area of misogynoir in public is street harassment of Black women. Now, street harassment takes many forms, whether it's kind of lewd or vile comments that typically a man, or it can sometimes be another woman, will shout or say to somebody that's in public, whether on transportation or walking or whatever, which is aimed to try to make that that individual receiving that harassment feel uncomfortable. However, with street harassment and Black women, there are perceptions that Black women in the media are often laced with themes of hypersexuality, right? Or promiscuousness, or oversized strength or aggression. And that kind of stereotype often places Black women in danger and often places Black women in a position of being completely unprotected. And seeing that kind of need, especially in the digital space with the advent of social media, a noted critical race theorist online, her name is Feminista Jones, she created this hashtag, which is hashtag #YouOkCis, which really allowed the conversation about street harassment to be centered on Black women. And she says, and she quotes, a lot of the conversations about street harassment in mainstream American culture, mainstream media, only show white women as the faces of victims, white women as the vulnerable individuals. Rarely do you see Black women as the face. Rarely do you see Black women as the victim. So it is a really coded way of illustrating and showing and protecting and showing up for Black women in a way that other Black people can hear. Using the word cis is a word very specific and very rooted in the Black American community, specifically because that's how we colloquially speak with each other. It helps us be able to stand up for each other and stand up for our individuals in public, making sure that Black women are protected in these spaces. Thinking about Black women even further reporting instances of sexual assault with policing. It needs to, again, be a safe space where Black women are not presumed to be promiscuous, or Black women are not presumed to be a sexually aggressive or the aggressors in a situation, which is why this wraparound of critical race theory, intersectionality, and misogynoir really have to take root in society so that we are protecting each other, specifically centering the voices and the experiences of Black women.
Talking a little bit about what that means in the workplace as well. Chi-Chi and I do a lot of work in workplaces where, you know, the conversation is quickly evolving. And I think something that when I was first learning about intersectionality, that really helped me kind of understand it was that, you know, Black women have their feet in two camps, essentially. And so when I'm talking to someone or I'm talking to a Black woman about her experience, I can share her experience of misogyny, right? We can commiserate about that. We can offer each other tips. We can talk through it, but I'm not going to be able to share the experience of being Black. Conversely, a Black man in that same environment, in the work environment, is going to be able to experience and talk about the experience of being Black in that particular organization as well. But again, not speaking exactly the same language whenever it comes to misogyny. And so it can be super isolating for Black women because no one except for Black women truly understands all of the shades of their experience. And this is why we want allies to get more literate in this conversation, because by understanding that perspective and understanding our own limitations, but also becoming more literate in the conversation and in the commonalities of Black female experience, we can be better allies. We can pick out misogynoir more easily. We can speak up whenever we need to and whenever it's appropriate in order to use our privilege to protect Black women inside of systems that we participate in and live in every day.
So as we begin to look in summation at the topics that we're discussing today, we have to really note that misogynoir truly is dangerous for Black women. And I don't want to understate or overstate that fact. I really don't. It dismisses the valid experiences of Black females. It dismisses their perspectives. It also causes a general disregard for structural issues that affect Black women specifically. So if you're not hearing this, or if you're not taking this into account, it's very easy to disregard this. It's very easy to ignore the fact that these are true structural issues. Misogynoir is also dangerous because it isolates Black women, right? It isolates you within your career. It can isolate you within your healthcare experience. And going back to the workplace, it can lead to a lack of retention in particular jobs. It can lead to career stagnation. And again, this touches every single portion of life. So we can't just say, oh, misogynoir is only prevalent in rap music. No, that's not it. There is an entire societal issue. And by treating these interactions as benign is really dangerous to Black women. It's dangerous for our economic vitality. It's dangerous for us in social settings. It's dangerous for us politically. It's dangerous for us mental health-wise. And we really need to be able to, again, look at the holistic idea of what a Black woman is and allow there to be layers and complexities that traditionally we don't really allow Black women to have. Which leads me to one of our last points, is the strong Black woman trope. Now, I know that every single person on this call has said, oh gosh, she's just a strong Black woman. And that's not necessarily a negative thing, but we do need to understand why that trope can be very harmful to Black women specifically. Now, I know that when you say that this woman is a strong Black woman, you are attempting to give this person a compliment. You admire their vitality, you admire their resilience, you admire their intelligence, their brilliance, their whatever it is, whether it's Beyonce performing at Coachella, or Michelle Obama and her brilliance and her arms, or, you know, young actresses that you think are just really, really forces to be reckoned with. The strong Black woman trope is harmful because it's a combination of benign racism and also benign sexism. It really does flatten and ignore the humanity and the individuality of Black women. American society really stresses rugged individualism and really tries to allow specifically white men to be very, very individualistic. Well, Black women are as well. We have our own thoughts, even within friend groups. We have our own ideas. We have our own styles of expressing ourselves in the world. And when you just state that, oh, well, she's strong, she can get it over with, she's fine, it really flattens that humanity of that particular Black woman. Moving forward, it really does presume that regardless of that particular individual Black woman's experience, her physical or mental health, her personality, her emotional state, that every single Black woman is strong enough to withstand and overthrow abuse or systems of discrimination. And we know that that's not correct. There are Black women that are extremely introverted. There are Black women that, you know, don't necessarily want to be your avatar of strength. Sometimes I wake up tired. I don't want to be a strong Black woman. I just want to be. And again, it puts Black women in this really untenable situation. And it can be very harmful, especially to one's mental health, because if Black women speak up and they say, okay, I'm going to step into my strength, right? They're seen as aggressive or loud. And if they don't speak up for things that they may see as uncomfortable or particularly harmful, they end up being complicit in their own subjugation. You're between a rock and a hard place there. And one of the quotes that consistently sticks with me is on the next slide. And it is by my favorite author, favorite anthropologist, Zora Neale Hurston. She speaks to the Black female experience in a way that particularly for me really resonates. And the quote is, "If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it," which is a perspective that Black women consistently have to be in. Whereas it is dangerous for me to speak out, it is also dangerous for me to stay silent. Which is why, again, we need allies and advocates around us, not speaking over us, but learning from us, growing with us, to be able to actually change the hearts, the minds, the systems that have been here so long, that have really oppressed and marginalized Black women and all of their layers and all of their multiplicity of intersections.
So something we talk about a lot too with Enlightened Solutions is that if you're a member of a marginalized group, it can be really difficult to center someone else's experience because there's a lot of pain that you need to process whenever you go through situations where you're marginalized. And all of us are still struggling for that type of equality and that type of equal footing. So it's important that we think about these things in terms that, you know, there's not types of oppression that are acceptable, more acceptable, or less acceptable. We have to understand that pain is pain. And when people talk about their experience, it is so personal that we need to take a step back and process our own pain and our own limitations and understand our own lens in order to fully center other people. And so I'm talking, you know, to a certain extent about self-care and self-awareness. Those are so important for being an effective ally, because understanding yourself and your perspective and being healthy enough to support others, even while you're being marginalized, is so much to ask, but it is also so necessary. we all need to be literate in supporting Black women. We can do that through educating ourselves with the voices of Black women, writers, artists, cultural thought leaders. We can take the time and space to process those voices. So again, thinking about and exercising our empathy, exploring ways to tangibly support Black women in the workplace, and financially supporting or amplifying initiatives created by Black women for Black women. Black Lives Matter is based on Black female experience, right? Even Pride is based on, the month of July is Pride, LGBTQ. Big portion of that lends itself to the work of Black women and trans women and gay women and bi women. And so we really need to think about those lenses, because as advocacy organizations, we've done a very good job of putting ourselves into buckets. The world has put us into buckets. And so we started advocating. When we started advocating, it was about me, my identity. And that's still hard to get away from, I think. And it's still important. Understanding and sharing our perspectives is still important, and it's going to continue to be important. But at the same time, we're at a point and a juncture in our shared history where we need to be more literate in one another's particular lenses and experiences. And so that's what tonight is about understanding the experiences of Black women in more nuance that you might not get other places. And I want to particularly thank Chi-Chi, because this is so much her voice and her work. And she is here doing the work so that we can benefit from it. And I've learned so much from her, and I learn from her every day. And she's a fantastic educator. And so I know when I'm learning, I am connecting with her on her experience. And whether or not I have lived it or not, I can connect with her on that. And I can become more literate, and I can spot it, and I can see where I can be more useful, not only for her, but for myself as well. Building these skills is good for all of us. We have to get better and more literate at this together.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Bethany. Truly, truly. So next steps. Again, we pride ourselves as a firm on being solutions-based and solutions-focused. We work backwards from solutions to really make sure that individuals are able to understand what they have taken in, learn from, and then also implement. So next steps, we will follow with a resource list, just like we did with our last session. It will include things like particular authors, writers, artists, cultural leaders, thought leaders, musicians, that if you're looking to broaden your perspective, that you should probably click on. These are people that are, at least in my opinion, really great either follows on Twitter or really great voices in literature or essays. So that resource list will also have videos on it as well. We will also be sending each person a recording of the session. So if you're like, oh, I really want to show somebody this, I wish that they were able to be on this call, there's a recording of the session. And in addition, we are very accessible on social media, very accessible via email. You can email us hello@enlightened-solutions.com, or find us on social media at Work Enlightened on the big social media platforms. And then lastly, you can join us for our next session. We have not decided exactly when it will be. We may be giving individuals some time to kind of process the things that we have already put out into the ether. It is not a one-day thing. These are not one-day trainings. We don't even consider them trainings, but we consider them ongoing discussions. So definitely feel free to email us, to contact us, so that we can continue having these discussions, perhaps on a more private platform, or perhaps in a private meeting, or just over social media. So.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop presenting here, and I'm gonna open it up for questions from you all. And we have a couple submitted as well that we can go through. But I'm gonna open the floor first. If people want to throw a question in the chat box here, or if you want to unmute and ask us your question, I'm gonna give you like a couple minutes to work your courage up if you need to. And then we can also jump into some of the questions you all submitted when you signed up.
Hi. I'll jump
Hi.
into this space if no one else is going to take advantage of it. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
My question is, I run the board for an organization that is trying, like we've brought in a trainer and like we're trying to make sure that our folks are fluent in the language and the ideas of anti-racism. And the bump that we keep running into is trying to do organization, like heavy strategy work, like forward thinking work for the organization versus like that individual knowledge base, and trying not to put like the egg in front of the chicken in terms of like how we can make sure the whole team arrives in this strategy equipped to implement it. And I wonder if you could speak to sort of like what comes first and how to parse through that.
Yeah, so when we work with organizations, we usually start with just a census. And so we start with just a history. So we meet one-on-one with a whole bunch of people. It depends on the size of your organization. And look, the thing is, traditional diversity and inclusion work has been kind of one-off things. They've been like, we're having this initiative, or we're, meeting a hiring quota, or we're doing the unconscious bias training. And what we do is that hybrid between personal growth, not just training, but personal growth, and those systemic changes. And the systemic changes, people want to go right to those, right? They want to say, well, build us a pipeline. Let's talk about how we get more people in here. The truth is that Chi-Chi and I don't build pipelines until we know that the people we bring in are going to be happy and healthy and safe in your organization. And there's usually a lot of work to do before we're there. We need to have, and everybody's literacy level is different, right? So you learned about misogynoir tonight, and there are people that haven't been sitting in these conversations that need a little bit more work to get there. And there are some people that are perfectly resistant to change. And so they need even more coaxing coming along. And so we do everything from individual coaching to group coaching at different learning levels and literacy levels. And we build to those more structural changes. That is how you build lasting change in an organization. We're usually, the first year is where we're assessing, right? And then we start with implementation. And I know that a lot of this work right now, it is timely. People want it to be fixed. But the truth is, there's just so much that we have to bridge in that gap that we need more time to do that. And it has to be ongoing. We've been telling organizations that you need to be investing in this. You need to be fully and wholeheartedly investing in this in every way that means, personally, professionally, monetarily. And so I think slow it down and take your time and do it right is probably my best advice. And don't go immediately for structural changes. I know that that's where you want to see the big benefit, but a lot of that work is introspective, and it's about the people more than it's about the structures. Structures can't fix this. If structures could fix this, we would see change. It's hearts and minds, it's people that then feed into structures that have been changed based off that.
Yeah. And I'll just add that at least from my perspective, at least from a strategies perspective, right? I think that it is strategic to work individually. So that means individuals need to have, again, a basic framework of understanding what types of changes they want to make within their lives, because as much as we like to separate our personal lives from our professional lives, increasingly so, especially with, again, social media, with COVID, with all of us working from home, with us not knowing what the new normal is, we really have to take the time to be very intentional. And we have to take the time to be very, very, very introspective, because you don't want to bring back the old habits into a new building. You don't want to, again, like Bethany had said, build a pipeline and realize that, oh, in that pipeline, you're not having the retention that you wanted. And then again, the system ends up collapsing on itself and you revert back to old ways. So I always push, especially for organizations, to really invest in the people first before they start investing in the structural change. Because what you don't want to do is be in a situation where you make these grand sweeping structural changes and then the individual buy-in is not there. And you're like, left holding the bag as a person that was like, well, I said I wanted to do this. Well, if there's no individual buy-in, it's not going to work.
Right. I have a question from one of the people who signed up here. So why can't white people see the obvious of racism?
So I love this question, and I'll repeat it one more time. It's why can't white people see the obviousness of racism? Again, this is my perspective, and my perspective, again, is very layered. But as an immigrant, as a Nigerian, I am experiencing American culture as a third culture. So I do not have the same culture as my parents. I do not have the same culture of my peers. I have a hybrid culture of both. And what I've noticed in American culture is that they think it is rude to state the obvious. It's very rude to literally say that somebody is racist, as opposed to noting that racism is there and you should probably call it out. It's seen as aggressive. And because we're still in a society that values politeness more than really, again, grand sweeping structural changes, I think that stating the obvious, at least at the base level, individuals will say, well, that's rude. You can't call people a name. Even when it can be very obvious. We named multiple different ideas within this presentation. Misogynoir, when we were talking about Yamnicha El Sindor, we know what that is. We saw it. We saw it was rude. It was coded. It was aggressive. But if she had turned around and said, I feel like that was misogynistic and racist, it would have torn the entire press conference down. So we have this pretense of politeness for white society that is not also reflected back onto, again, racial minorities. It's the same politeness is not given to racial and ethnic minorities here.
I think that's a fantastic point, Chi-Chi. And it's so cool to hear your perspective from the outside. I also just think there's so much resistance because, some people have asked us, what's the appropriate way to call out someone or to approach someone who really doesn't believe in these racist structures or these misogynistic structures. And the truth is, for some people, there is no way to properly call them out, right? They are never going to agree with you because of that resistance internal in their worldview. It is difficult for many white people to sit with the fact that we've had an advantage in this world. It's very difficult whenever we live in a society that talks about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and we value ourselves based on our life experience and what we've accomplished and what we make. And so whenever we say that, our sense of identity, our feelings are hurt. But at the same time, we have to start understanding that life is about more than that. And it's going to be about more than that in the future. People have understood that in the past, and we need to do better at understanding that in the future. So there's a lot of resistance, and there's no perfect way of doing it. I have absolutely called people a racist to their face. I have. Has it worked? A couple times. It wasn't really about that. It was about everybody else in the room and letting them know, hey, that's racist. And whether or not, sometimes people who are just observing are going to see that and potentially internalize it or examine their own biases. It's not always about winning with the person in front of you. Sometimes it's about winning the audience. But take that into account as well.
Yeah.
I have one other question I think is really useful. Specific strategies.
I think
we have a question. Go ahead.
And I don't know if they have a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
Hi.
Are you talking about me? Hi.
Yes. Hello.
I'm wearing my fashionable blue blocker glasses.
That's awesome.
Ooh.
Yeah, thanks for having this. I really enjoyed it. So I have a small publishing company. Right now I only have 2 people I have contracted, but I'm planning to add 2 more people to the team like end of summer, early fall. And I'm new at leading, and I want to, so my company is a queer company, and I want to bring Black people on staff so that we continue, you know, having a staff that mirrors or reflects our community. But as I'm new to being a leader, and I just want to make sure, you know, kind of like right from the beginning, I'm not making, or I'm doing my best to make sure racial equity is, I can say it's something I care about, but I want to be doing the actions to like show that. And do you, I guess my question is, do you all with your firm, or I don't know exactly what you would call it, but do you work with like new companies like that are just starting out, or do you have recommendations of people who do, or like any advice on what kind of training I could bring in like soon this year to a smaller company?
Yeah. Well, there's two heads to that. To answer your first question, yes, we work with any size organization. I mean, we're not exclusionary to like, oh, you only have 2 employees. Like Bethany and I are the only 2 employees that work at our firm. So it'd kind of be silly if we're like, no, like too small. But more than that, I think first and foremost, congratulations. That's something to be lauded for, especially you looking at yourself as a leader, a rising leader, trying to really live your own truth and create a space for, again, queer voices to be amplified into the public, and knowing that queer voices come in a variety of intersections, layers, backgrounds. So. The second thing is there are a lot of organizations that are known, established organizations, and kind of informal frameworks that you could definitely reach out to try to see, you know, if you can invest in racial equity in their regard, in that space. You know, I would reach out probably to the LGBT Center and talk to them. They are, again, they're helmed by a lesbian, what does Phyllis call herself? A radical lesbian Black feminist. And with that framework, you will be able to see, you know, a push that will be intersectional and will be layered, and maybe even just bounce ideas off of over there.
Yeah, and we're happy to chat with you and see what makes sense. We've said many times, diversity work is diverse. So, you know, we work with small organizations, we work with large organizations. With large organizations, what we have to do is very comprehensive, because we have to roll back so much of that work that they've already built, that infrastructure they've already built. When you're talking about a startup, it can be sometimes a little simpler because we're starting from the ground up. And also starting with a small team. So we're not interviewing, you know, 100 people, which we do from time to time. So there's things like that. So we can definitely talk. And I think it's just very nuanced. You know, when you have a small team with different perspectives and different literacy levels, they're going to need different conversations about what makes sense for them. But I really do laud you on thinking about reflecting your community, because just like intersectionality we're talking about, especially with writing, like, you can't write the experiences of someone else. I just don't really think you can fully do that. There are people that are talented, but I think that you know, making sure that you have that reflected experience is really, really integral. So kudos to you for starting there, honestly.
Absolutely.
One quick question we got was, what are some specific strategies to help understand the concept and how their various identities shape experiences and worldview? So I wanted to just address this real quick on when I touched with when we were presenting on the importance of self-care and self-identity. Understanding your own lens will help you differentiate and pick out the things that you're struggling with as you're learning somebody else's stories. So like Chi mentioned, you know, I'm from a rural area. I was homeschooled. My first day of school was college. I have a lot of siblings. I have Appalachian roots. And so I have kind of a very specific worldview that's pretty different than a lot of people. And when I'm interpreting someone else's worldview, it filters through that lens. And so things that I particularly struggle with, or things that I don't understand conceptually because I can't relate to them, or things that challenge something inside of me that's hard for me to deal with. Those are things that are really important, that we become introspective and we think about the intersections that we inhabit, not just in terms of race or gender or sexuality, but also in terms of education and family, and religion, and age, and hobbies. Those are things where you really do filter the world through that lens. And I think it's important that we kind of call that out. It is a form of self-care. And I feel that this work has actually, in a lot of ways, made me so much more self-aware, because I have to understand when I'm learning something and I think I'm not getting this, or, oh, this is hard for me to absorb, that gives me something to say, what is it about me and my experience that makes this challenging for me? I really encourage people to explore that and understand that about themselves and their own intersection. There are intersections that the world marginalizes you for, and then there are also intersections where it's more personal, it's about your lens. So think about that. Think about how you're filtering things and how you understand things. And, I encourage you to investigate those areas that feel a little pinprick as you're learning.
I also think that just adding on to that, the second layer would be treating the individuals who are speaking about their experience as subject matter experts. So not immediately challenging them and being like, are you sure? Or like, I don't know, that's not exactly how it happened. Or framing things as a conversation or a debate, which is a very big topic now. Individuals saying, well, let's just debate about this, as opposed to understanding that you cannot debate my Black woman experience. That's not something you can debate, because it is just a fact. I go through this world as a Black woman. You cannot debate me on that. Now, you may feel a particular way about how I may express myself. You may feel a particular way about how I enjoy the world or I perceive the world, but that is a you thing. That is not a me thing. You cannot look at somebody else's experience and negate it in that way. You have to do the work within yourself. And that does not excuse, again, very marginalized groups from doing the work themselves. I do the work every single day. I am a Black, straight woman who does have an immense amount of privilege. That means I need to be learning from, listening to, sitting with the ideas, the scholars, and the brilliance of individuals that are more marginalized than me, or individuals that have different marginalization than me. So that includes trans women, that includes Asian men, that includes white women, that includes specifically centering Black women, and just making sure that you are understanding that people are subject matter experts in their own experience, and you cannot negate that experience.
I love that, Chi-Chi. Fantastic. I've got one more question here. Does anybody, we'll open up the floor. We're going to answer this one more question, and we'll answer it. We'll open up the floor for last questions. So this one is, how can I, as a white ally, know when it is best to speak up and advocate, and when it is best to just let the voices of Black people be heard? I think, Chi-Chi and I actually talked about this beforehand, and Chi-Chi pointed out a time where she felt that I had handed her the mic in a positive way. We were in a meeting together and we were talking to this gentleman, and he kept kind of talking over Chi-Chi, right? And we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And I tend to, it's partly personality. I tend to be super direct. I tend to be pretty aggressive. I mean, you could call me aggressive. But when this person kept cutting her off, I got frustrated with it. And so I cut him off. And I said, you mentioned a question a little bit farther back, and I'm going to actually hand this to Chi-Chi because her experience here makes a lot more sense. And it wasn't even about Black womanhood. It was about education, right? It was about something that is Chi-Chi's area of expertise. And also just knowing Chi-Chi, I could see on her face that she had something to say, right? And so I read the situation, and I used either my personality, but also my privilege to speak up and put Chi-Chi in the center. And, it depends. Again, like we've talked about with our allies training, is that you need to get to know the Black people that you're trying to support. You need to know them as individuals, as people. I know Chi-Chi And so I knew what would have been useful and acceptable in that moment. But another personality type might have been offended by that, right? So I can't give you an honest or perfect answer, but I can tell you, use your emotional intelligence, use your human experience, use your personality, and you're not always going to get it perfectly right. I'm sure there have been times where I've cut people off where I probably shouldn't have, or where they took it, a different way. But it's also part of my personality. I'm not a perfect person. I am always continuing to learn. But behind all of that is not malice, right? And I work really hard to make sure that that's the case. And so I encourage you to continue coming from a place of love and empathy, but use those skills that you've been building here to exercise that empathy and get to know people individually.
I think specifically, and yes, everything Bethany said was correct. In my personal life, I tend to be very loud and very gregarious. I'm an extrovert's extrovert, but at work, I tend to be really a lot more reflective and quiet. And typically when those situations arise, I rather just sit there and then at the end say something kind of pointed at that person to let them know that I didn't appreciate it. But at that moment, Bethany, again, because not only are we peers, we work together as colleagues, but Bethany and I are very close friends. And she knew that, like, more than just being my friend, she knew that I had expertise and that that gentleman had to hear from me in that moment. But circling back to the beginning of that question, as a Black woman, and I can only speak from my lens and my experience, I think it is most helpful when white allies, individuals, whatever you would like to call yourself, are speaking up towards other white people. I cannot go knock on your grandmother's door and start asking her why she holds particularly prejudicial to racialized views. I can't do that. I'm not gonna do that at all. I'm not going to put myself in that kind of danger. But you can definitely talk to Mima Eleanor and say, so Mima, you probably shouldn't do this or say this or experience this or live this way because it is not good or because it is not factual. I think that white people really, more than anything, for this particular movement, this particular time that we're in, need to be talking to each other. Black people have been speaking up. Black women have consistently been speaking up. Intersectionality may be new to you today, but as you could see, intersectionality has been around in America since the mid-1800s and most likely even before then. So we need to be able to understand that white people have to talk to other white people. We, myself as a Black woman, sometimes I will speak up and say something to an individual that is outside of my group. But I truly do not believe that my perspective is going to necessarily always change somebody's mind. But the closer you are to that person's intersection, the closer you are to understanding and being able to speak to that particular framework and to understand where they are specifically coming from. I call things racist when they're racist because they are racist. I call things sexist when they are sexist because they are sexist. You may need to couch that in language that is a little bit more floral for individuals in your life, but I won't. I also do believe, and I'm sorry for such a long-winded answer, but I also do believe that listening and centering the voices of Black people in your life, or the ones that you are experiencing media or culture from, is also another way to do that. Allow Black people to speak to their experience and be there to listen, internalize, and then again, turn back into your own communities and do the work that way.
That's awesome, Gigi. Fantastic points. Anybody else have questions you want to pitch at us? I'm going to give you a couple seconds here, and then we'll let y'all go.
Yeah. No question is too small or too, too out there.
Basic, even basic, yeah. If you have basic questions.
Yeah, we do this work, we hear these questions, and again, we enjoy doing this.
We clearly love explaining it. This is what we're doing in our evenings and all day. We love it. Okay, I'm not seeing new questions, so we're going to let you go. We appreciate your time. We look forward to connecting with you and hearing your questions. We'll be contacting you with the video, and with Chi-Chi's amazing resource list. I have a couple follows I need to add on there myself. And we hope you can come to the next one. We'd like to continue the conversation. This has been very useful for us too, hearing your perspectives and questions and what people are thinking. So we really appreciate your time, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you all. Good night.